loving football, the mindset and work ethic, the guy that finishes, the guy that does all those extra things to really show it. I think that's kind of what separates the guy that, hey, we want this kid in our program as a scholarship player versus we might give him a shot as a walk-on.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Athlete Country Club, where we believe it's not only our duty, but our mission to become the best version of ourselves. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, former teammate of mine at Fresno State, Coach Matt Smith. I like to call him Matty Ice. Matt was definitely a standout offense lineman for the Bulldogs. Multiple years starter who helped kind of anchor the O-line in the Mountain West. And after his playing career, he made the transition into coaching. Now he's the offensive line coach at Montana State, one of the top FCS programs in the country. We're going to kind of dive into his journey as a player, his coaching path, and what parents and athletes really should understand about the recruiting process. So, Matty Ice, brother, nice to have you.
Oh, absolutely, man. Blessed to be here. And I got a lot of respect for you, what you've done, man. You helped inspire me to become who I was. So blessed to be here, excited.
I appreciate that, brother. I appreciate that a lot. It means a lot in that. I mean, just for you personally, kind of take us back. What made you choose Fresno State, and how was your recruiting process coming out of high school?
Yeah, you know, I think everyone that was in Fresno kind of understood coming in. I was a walk-on. I'm about all of, I like to say 6 foot, and short, fat, white dude, and that's okay. But I just knew I played at a high level. I played at St. John Bosco, and a lot of teammates that were getting highly, highly recruited, and rightfully so. And so I knew that, playing against the best in the country every single week and, in my opinion, holding my own, I wanted to play at the highest level possible. And so had a couple smaller offers, which was great. University of San Diego, Western New Mexico, all that. But essentially, that program couldn't offer athletic scholarships. So it was basically going to be a walk on there. And so grinding, potentially Davis, Cal Poly, and then all of a sudden Fresno State came about. And I knew I had to take that opportunity. I wanted to play at the highest level. And, it was hard, seeing all your teammates and the guys that you're a competitor, you think you might be better or you're just as good, and they're getting all these offers because they're however tall and however big, and a lot of soul searching, I'd say, and a lot of doubters, and I think that kind of put a chip on my shoulder that I'm going to grind and grind and grind and compete and do everything I possibly can to get that opportunity, and I did. So I'd say looking back, I think what could have helped me out, maybe not going to camps actually did help me out because of my size, but
Yeah.
probably could have gone to a couple more camps. Talking about nowadays recruits, I think camps are big, but I just didn't have those big opportunities because of my size. But I had the one that I had, and I was happy to be there, and they wanted me there to go compete, and couldn't have asked for it to be any other way.
Yeah. No, you said something that kind of provoked the thought in me and kind of a question, but kind of lean into you talking about the soul searching aspect of the recruiting process. And when I say that, it's more so there are times where there's a gap in maybe talent at the time in high school and maybe your expectations of where you should be. Obviously, it worked out for you. You bet on yourself and you knew deep down, like, hey, I'm playing at Bosco, I'm playing Modern Day, De La Salle, I'm playing the top competition. I know I could play with these guys. But maybe a guy who's in a Division 2 or Division 3 school in California, but he's like, hey, I think I could play Division 1. Kind of talk about where's kind of the line, because it is a fine line as far as like, hey, I think I could play Division 1, and maybe you are a small D1 guy or a Division 2 athlete.
Yeah, I think that you need to have the right people around you giving you the right advice, right? Guys who have done it before, guys who knows what it takes and what you're about, and kind of give you that guidance. I think, I was fortunate enough to have a football coach as an uncle, and a lot of, my dad played college football. And so I was pretty confident that if I got my opportunity, I had the right habits established and built that I could push through those tough times. And I think that's important for kids to understand is, there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into playing at that level if you're maybe not as talented as those 4, 3, 5-star recruits. I didn't have the probably typical college experience. I had to sacrifice to do certain things to be able to just have an opportunity to play on special teams on that 2018 team. You know what I mean? And so say that's probably number one. Number two, I think it's what do you want your college experience to be? If you want to grind and push and scrap to get those special teams minutes maybe to start, then that's your passion and that's your goal, then great. if you just want to have a great college football career and be able to look back and say, I played at this level and I was able to accomplish all of these things at the school I played for that really wanted me. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I would have loved to go to a smaller school and been the guy and competed and did my thing. I think it's all about what you want out of your college experience and having the right people around you to say, hey, right now I see your habits. I think you're good to do that, or you better start fixing these habits and start developing your work ethic if this is truly something you want. I think I talk about all the time, everybody wants to do this or that, but are you really willing to sacrifice and work to get there?
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree more. I think football is such a journey and a process. And even for myself personally, I mean, I think a lot of people see Fresno State, Marcus, and kind of the success I had while I was there. But I mean, it was a long 3 years for me when I was at Oregon State. I mean, I was showing up every single day like I was a starter. I wasn't getting any reps. I was showing up every day and watching extra film and watching the VR tape and showing up to the weight room and doing the extra treatment. And then you have certain days you're like, well, why am I even doing this? Because I'm not even playing. Like you're not reaping the benefits of all the work that you're putting in. And little did I know, kind of for me, the transfer portal was the biggest blessing as far as finding a home in Oregon or in Fresno State after that. And then, like you said, kind of winning the Mountain West Championship in 2018, winning a couple bowl games, the Vegas Bowl, the Hawaii Bowl, and just having the time of our life. But kind of talk about that. I mean, just managing player expectation, but then also just what the process should look like and how you guys treat the process at Montana State.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head as far as kind of what we look at. And Coach had us read a book this summer, and our leadership council. We actually had the author came out. It was the Twin Thieves. I don't know if you ever read that book, but one of the chapters it talks about watering the bamboo, and so farmers of bamboo just watering the same seed over and over and over again for 3 years. You don't see anything, and so part farmers are coming around. What are you doing that for? It's not going to work. It's not going to work. But really, what it's doing over those 3 years is building those strong roots in the ground. So then all of a sudden, in a matter of whatever it was, 6 weeks, 6 months, that thing shoots up to about 50 feet tall, and I think that kind of I don't know, summarizes the experience in my head. Like you said, Marcus, I had to sacrifice just to get the opportunity to be the PP on punt. You know what I mean? I had to do everything right to just be that guy and earn that role. And to me, it was just, I wanted to do everything I possibly could, whether it was in the weight room, the classroom, the film room, on the field. I want to do everything right just to get that opportunity. And so, because of how limited of an athlete I was at the time, that was my mindset. And so I did everything I possibly could. And there were days where I'm like, I'm going to get cut. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even get the snap right now to the quarterback, or I'm doing all this extra work and I'm still getting beat by this pass rush move, or I'm still not getting the amount of movement that I need to be a starter here. What am I doing wrong? Or why am I, spending all this time and going to bed early and trying to eat this and that? And why am I doing that? And I think when you kind of have that end goal and understand, you got to really, I know it's cliche, trust the process,
Yeah.
that what you have going on and what you're building to is not going to happen overnight. And if you really trust in it, and you're going to see the gains. And so I think that's kind of what I stuck to. And I had a lot of people, again, I think it goes back to the people around you that, I had to call my dad and be like, what am I doing wrong? Or why am I doing this? And there are those moments. And I think that's kind of what pushes me, what makes me look back and feel proud of what I was able to accomplish is there were a lot of times where I said, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
And I kept pushing through and it worked out.
No, that's absolutely huge. And I had the exact same experience too. When you get to college as an athlete, it's funny, you kind of have this big grandiose kind of expectation, like I've arrived, this is my moment, I'm in college, I'm the big time Division I football player. And I think you kind of get a small dose of reality that, hey, you're hitting the reset button. You were at the top of the totem pole where you came from. Now you're kind of hitting reset. Now you're 17, 8 years old coming into going against guys that are 21, 22. Some of them might have a wife and a kid, and they're just playing for a whole different level and appreciation for the game. And I mean, college athletics, like you said, it could be brutal at times. I mean, just physically and mentally. How do you teach your players to just have resilience?
Yeah, I think it's something that you need to talk about. I'm a big believer in relationships. I think in recruiting, in life, you need to have a relationship with the people you're around. And the great thing about I think Montana State is we're a developmental program. You know, we build it up through the high school ranks. That by no means do we not look at the portal when needed or anything like that, but we really build it up through high school. And I think having people around you with like-minded mindsets, for lack of better words, just guys that you know you can talk to and continue to grind with. And I think as a coach, bringing up that this isn't going to be easy. You know, if this was easy, everyone would do it, right? And I think the relationships that you can build with your players to keep checking in on them. You know, I think that kind of goes a little bit under the radar. You got to check in on your guys when you're a freshman in your first fall camp, you're a sophomore or junior and you're still on the scout team, you know, you gotta check in with those guys and make sure that they understand, you know, what they're working towards. What do they need to work on? You're doing all right. You know, there's X, Y, and Z is why you're here. Let's make sure we either fix that or your opportunity is coming next. And I think the relationship piece of a coach and a player, you know, I had so many great coaches, Tedford and Grubb and Roman and you know, all those guys, Coach DeBoer, you know, I was able to go to those guys and ask questions and, hey, why am I doing this? Or what do you need to see from me? And I think that when the players can see the light at the end of the tunnel, they see that end goal. I think that helps when you keep checking in that they can keep pushing through and be resilient, that they know, all right, it's not right now, but eventually I'm going to get to that spot. And I see a path. You know, it's hard when you don't see a path moving forward. I think the relationship with the coaches can help that.
Yeah. And what coach would you say, whether as a player or in your coaching career so far, has helped shape kind of the coach you are today?
Oh man, that is, I will say, I feel like I've hit the lottery as far. I mean, if you look at the coaches that I've been around, I mean, Jeff Tedford, he's probably number one on the list. My ultimate mentor, a guy I know I can call up at any time. I call him my football grandpa. Like he's that guy for me. Um, and then you know head coach of Alabama, Kalen DeBoer is my offensive coordinator and my head coach, and you know, and the cool thing about it, I can still text him and get responses from him, and he's just such a down to earth guy, and I love the way that he involved us as players. You know, going to my senior year with the Unity Council and involving us in decisions, I felt like we had a lot of team buy-in then. I'd say Ryan Grubb has really formed my work ethic and the
Yeah.
way I go about things, you know, and anybody that's had Ryan Grubb as an offensive line coach can attest to the amount of times we've worked and grinded and got better. But honestly, I don't think I'd be the player I was or the coach I am without an influence like him, a guy that pushes you to the limits. I'm just going to keep going, Marcus. I've
Yeah.
been so blessed. I mean,
Mm.
Kirby Moore, offensive coordinator at Missouri, a guy that was a receiver coach when I was playing, but I always somehow had that relationship with him. We were always able to talk, and just such a good coach, and the way he goes about it and the way he can command a room, I think is special. Sanga Tuatele, offensive line coach at ASU. I'd say that man really taught me how to be a professional. Um, just the way he goes about his work and recruiting, you know, the relationships piece. And I really feel like my first year as a GA being under him, I learned how to be a professional and how to go about in this business and really shoot for what you want. And then Brian Armstrong, another guy that, you know, taught me a lot about football and technique and a lot of things I do today. I'm very blessed, you know, to be here at Montana State, partly due to my time with Brian Armstrong. Roman Sapolu, my offensive line coach, my last 3 years, you know, I played center my whole life, but he played at the collegiate level at Oregon State, and he was a stud. And the things that he taught me grew my game exponentially. I could keep going on and on.
Yeah.
I'm still
No,
there.
I feel it.
I truly feel like I've hit the lottery, and each single one of those guys that I've mentioned, even Pat Hill, you know, each one of those guys that I've mentioned, I really feel like I've tried to take bits and pieces of all those certain guys and kind of make it my own. And so I've been very blessed.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And football, it's unreal, man. It's such a big sport, but small at the same time. Because a lot of the guys that you mentioned, obviously we played on the same team, so there's some crossover there. But even like a guy like Roman, like I actually played at Oregon State. I think I was a red shirt when he was a senior, and you know how those like we knew of each other and kind of said what's up, but I wasn't really playing, so it was kind of like, hey, what's up, Roman? You know, kind of one of those
Yeah.
deals. But I think a key word that you said there was to describe kind of the work ethic you took from those guys, and I truly believe you had it as a player was just your professionalism. I mean, how do you kind of seep that work ethic and grind and mentality into the players that you work with? Because that's something that I've always admired about you and kind of just the way you approach the game. Because I know I was a couple years older than you when we were at state, but I saw it in you kind of what I was doing myself when I was at Oregon State. It's like, man, this guy's working his tail off like he's the starter, but he's not getting the little cherry at the end of it. Like he's not reaping the benefits just yet, but your attitude and mindset never changed. Like you didn't come up, you do get guys, and I'm sure you see it as a coach and kind of touch on that just as far as their attitude. You see a guy that's not getting the amount of reps that he probably wants to get and maybe his shoulders drop, or maybe he's not as smiling anymore. He's not as energetic at practice anymore. Like that's something that I want to applaud the heck out of you for, man. I mean, your energy level, I'm sure you felt it mentally, but you never showed it. I mean, you were always right here the whole time. So how do you kind of, as a coach now, how do you kind of coach that into your athletes?
Yeah, I think that's a interesting question. I think to a certain extent you're innately kind of wired that way, if that makes sense. And um, your drive and what your goals and motivation are, I think that has a lot to do with it. As far as coaching it, again, I just kind of the first thing that pops in my head goes back to relationship, and I think sharing your story and sharing stories of others helps guys to relate to it and what they can do. But I think it all goes back into relationships where guys I think guys do look up to. I mean, I know I did, and I know you say you did. Like, I look up to coaches. I want to try to be like those guys or the older guys in the room, and I want to do that. And so I think relationships with the guys that we admire and the relationships with coaches, the more we can share our story and maybe give them tips and tricks to push through the noise and focus on that end goal. I think that's probably the best way to coach it. But I do believe that a lot of it is kind of how that individual is wired. And I think that's part of, through the recruiting process, what, talking to high school coaches and family members and even teachers, how is this kid wired? Everyone's going to be good and high energy and bring the juice when everything's going well. What is this guy like during challenges? I think that's part of our job as coaches to find out what those guys are innately and then say, okay, can we help bring him along or not?
Yeah, no, and that's a perfect transition too. I mean, just kind of as far as the recruiting process, and I just had a conversation with one of my former Oregon State teammates, and we just kind of talked about the idea that, hey, if you play at any level in college, junior college to Division 1, I mean, you're the top 7.5% already. So you got 100 people in the room. I mean, really only seven of you guys are going to get that opportunity. What's the difference between an athlete that gets a scholarship offer and one who doesn't from a coach's perspective?
As far as like how they're treated like here.
No, no, not as far as how they're treated. I'm talking as far as a high school kid where maybe you have two kids identically the same, athletically fit, height, weight, everything's kind of the same on paper. They almost look like the exact same player. What's the deciding factor that's going to kind of lean to like, yes, this guy's a scholarship guy, or I don't know, maybe he needs to go a year or two of junior college and develop, and then he become a scholarship guy.
Yep, it's all those intangible things. To me, I think it has to do with, I'd say maturity to a certain level, right? You're still a high
Yeah.
school senior. There's a lot of maturity that can happen in college, and that's okay. But I'd say the work ethic, the mindset, how is that guy wired? Does he love football? That's a big thing for me is does he truly love football or does he love what football can do for him? And so you got to find that out as a college recruiter. Toughness for especially me up front coaching the big boys. If I ask a coach, hey, give me 3 words to describe this player, and he doesn't say tough or nasty or something like that, I'm probably going to be okay. And it's not the end all be all, but I love when coaches say this guy is tough, he's nasty, he's mean. Of course, if I ask him, is he tough? Yeah, coach, he's tough. But I think that's kind of a separator. But loving football, the mindset and work ethic, and I think the style of play, the guy that finishes, the guy that does all those extra things to really show it. I think that's kind of what separates the guy that, hey, we want this kid in our program as a scholarship player versus we might give him a shot as a walk-on.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, just like give me something specific. I mean, when Coach Smith comes on the high school campus, I mean, you're representing one of the top FCS programs in the country. So, I mean, it means something when you step on campus. Like, what does that kind of process look like? Say you're recruiting, I don't know, Natani Muti. You step on
Often.
campus. Yeah. Well, yeah, offer. One of our former teammates who's now with the Detroit Lions and an absolute stud. Didn't look like that in high school though, as you know. I think he was a band kid, real thin, didn't have so kind of talk about what does that process look like as soon as you step on campus, like what are you looking for immediately? Like how are you checking off the list of the intangibles for those kids?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we should have an idea walking into the school. Okay, who are the guys that we have an eye on, right? And so, whether it's camps or social media or whatever it may be, I try to make sure I know who the guys are that we want to recruit. Who do I need to get more information on? And so, it's obviously depending on the time period, whether you can speak to just the coaches or see the guys work out, but. I kind of have a couple guys already starred in my head, based off watching film and tape before and talking with other coaches. Like, all right, let's see what this kid is about. And so I think you first talk to the head coach, right, and try to get a good feel for what he's about. It's great when high school coaches have transcripts and all those things readily available, so you can kind of check those boxes. But talking to the head coach is huge. What is he like as an individual? Is he a leader? How tough is he? When times are tough, what can he do to help the team? How does he react to, kind of like the E plus R equals O. When tough stuff happens, how does he react and what's the outcome of that? After that, if you can talk to a position coach, I think that's obviously another great resource to see. The head coach, might be at least in my position, a defensive guy, and he's not with the O line every day,
Yeah.
whatever it may be, right? And so talking to the position coach, I think, is huge. He's going to give you some real insight on how he works day to day, drill to drill. I always like to try to find, luckily my recruiting areas, I'm somewhat connected. I know some people. I like to find an academic advisor, a teacher, whatever, just to hear their opinion on the kid, because I think obviously coaches want to push their kids out and say they had this recruit go here and there, and I totally understand that. That's what they're there for. That's what they should do, and I respect that. But I think listening and talking to a person outside of the football program that's at the school, if they're willing to share their thoughts on the kid and how he reacts, that to me speaks volumes as well. Because we don't want kids that are just really good football players and are good to their teammates. I want to know guys that are good to their buddy in sixth period history. You know what I mean? And good
Yeah.
students and good people off the field. So I'd say those are probably the three biggest things that I do. And then obviously, if we're in a time period where I can get a physical eval, going out there and watching the guys move around is huge. And that's also where you can find some guys that maybe you didn't have on your list walking in. You're like, unfortunately, in my position, I wasn't that guy, but who is that? Because he
Yeah.
looks pretty good.
Yeah. No, and that's just two more questions and we'll wrap up for you. But that's a gold mine of information, dude. And just for because even I know when coaches first started recruiting me on campus and they're showing up to campus, I remember one time specifically we had, I believe it was a UC Davis recruit showed up and I saw him step on the campus. He told me he was coming, didn't tell me what time. He probably got there, it was probably like a transition period, so it was probably like 9:15. But then he didn't actually call me to the coach's office to go talk to him till about 11:30. And it was one of the very first coaches that had recruited me. So I was kind of nervous because I was like, man, like, I know he's here. Like, why isn't he called me to come talk to me, And then obviously, as you start getting more experience in the process, that's why I think what you just shared is invaluable to people to understand is, hey, they're going to go talk to your head coach. They're going to talk to your position coach. They're going to talk to an academic advisor. Like, if they're on campus, I've always said they know you could play football already. Like, that's kind of in the rear view mirror now at this point. It's like, hey, well, what kind of guy am I recruiting? And kind of just to follow up on that, why is it important to recruit a locker room guy, someone who's going to be a positive addition to the locker room and not just a football player?
Yeah, and I think I was fortunate enough to kind of understand this early because of my uncle, but I got a family to feed and I'm putting my livelihood, my wife's livelihood in the hands of 18 to 22 year olds, and so I love coaching because of the way we can develop young men. And all those coaches that I mentioned before have helped shape me into who I am, and my dad and my mom and all that. But um, it's huge. One guy, as you know, one guy can shift an entire locker room. And all of a sudden you go from all these high aspirations of playing for a championship to what the heck just happened. And so um, I think it's invaluable to make sure you're recruiting the right guys. And I remember in Fresno, we talk about, listen to recruits. They tell you who they are, you know? And so the guys that are about the right things and talk about the same values and are aligned with the values of your team and your locker room, um, even if maybe he's not the greatest player of all time or he's not the recruit you really, really wish or thought he was, he's not going to take away and he's only going to add value in culture or maybe it's special teams. And so those guys are completely invaluable in my opinion. And I think the guys that do take away, all that does is cause distractions and conflicts on your team. And truly, it can derail your season. And so I think that's why we spend so much time trying to find out that part, or we should be trying to find out that part, because don't get me wrong, there's very talented individuals that help win football championships that may not be the best people, right?
Yeah.
But you don't get so lucky all the time with those guys. And so if you have a strong culture, you have one of those guys, you might be able to get away with it. But that
Yeah.
strong culture of your locker room, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And final question I have for you. I mean, we've covered such a range of stuff. I mean, from professionalism, respecting the process, showing up every day, kind of the grind, refine, compete mentality, old Coach Tedford Bible there.
Yep.
But
Teach, compete,
final
commit.
question for me, I mean, is just what's one piece of advice you'd give 16-year-old Matt Smith?
Oh man, that's a great question. Um, that is a thought-provoking question. I'd say enjoy the high school recruiting process, even though it's not the same as everybody else that I was around. Enjoy that process and don't worry about others. Focus on yourself. I think there's a couple nights where, and I was luckily self-aware of my God-given ability and
Yeah.
and attributes. So I guess I wasn't necessarily rooting for getting a USC offer or anything like that. But I think, it does kind of play with your mind a little bit when you think you're a good football player and you're just not getting the opportunities that you want. And so I think just to enjoy the high school process, enjoy playing high school football. You only get to do that once. Um, I'm a man of faith. I think trusting in God's plan and that's going to work out for you and to just truly live in those moments. I'd probably say that more than anything. Just don't worry about anybody else. Focus on yourself. Focus on enjoying playing high school football. And it's all going to work out the same way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. So, I mean, one, I mean, really enjoying the high school process. Two, trusting the big man upstairs. And hey, your process is your process. It's going to happen the way it needs to happen. So, Matty Ice, brother, appreciate everything for joining us, sharing your journey from, I mean, Fresno State to Montana State, everything in between. And for parents and athletes listening, this is exactly the type of insight you need when just navigating the recruiting process. And thanks again, brother. It was great having you on Athlete Country Club.
Anytime, man. You're a stud. Appreciate you.
Yeah, no doubt.